let's take a look at this. And I want to have you read this first one and know that that's what our goal is to be able to figure out by the end of this assignment. So we're actually going to start on number 1, do all those, and then by the time we finish all those, we'll know how to come back. We'll know how to come back and finish that first one. So here's the idea. Let me show you on decimals real fast. Negative 16t times t minus 8. So just want to show you what that would look like on here. Oh, I forgot. I only likes x. I got to use x, t minus 8. Okay, so if I graph this, can you guys figure out that the parabola looks something like this? See if I can. Oh, over here. Yeah, I'll make the y-x-axis something a little bit smaller. -1 to 10. There we go. So would you be able to look at that equation and come up with this? That's what you want to be able to do. Goes up in the air, it's facing down. Figure out that the vertex is way up here at 4, 256. Okay? And the x-intercepts are here and here. So that's all the information you're going to want to be able to figure out by the end of this. So let me walk you through a few of these, referring back to where we started, and you'll probably be able to figure out that on your own by the end of this. Okay? So you're going to see a lot of questions when it comes to word problems about things going up in the air and falling down. Basically, anything that goes up in the air and comes back down, right, follows this kind of path. Kind of goes up and up and up. At some point, it gets to the height, the tallest or the maximum height, and then starts falling back down, basically in the same exact path that it went up, same exact shape, in this parabola shape. So another reason this, what we're studying right now, we did the flashlight and the satellite dishes, and now this, anything going up in the air and coming back down follows this kind of path as well. This flight path makes it kind of important. If we send something up in the air, it's kind of important to know where it's going to land, right? Like with fireworks going up in the air, it's kind of important to know where those might come down and make sure people aren't too close to it so they don't, you know, have a problem and light on fire, you know? So something we actually have to calculate for safety reasons as well. So let's get these basics down. Okay. Now you notice it's all the same things we just looked at. Finding x-intercepts, finding the axis symmetry, finding the vertex is open up and down. All right. Some of these things you don't necessarily have to do in this order. Like eventually you can be able to look just at this equation, identify a few characteristics and know if it opens up and down without even graphing it. Okay. So that's what we're trying to get towards, is being able to find all of this eventually without graphing anything at all. As we did with absolute value and graphing linear equations, straight lines, we always graph it first and say, oh, graph it, find the slope. Then after a while we realize we don't really need to graph it to figure out the slope. It's right here in the equation somewhere. Same with the y-intercept. We can figure this stuff out eventually without having to actually graph it all. Okay, so let's see here. Start. Yeah. So start this way. X-intercepts. What do we know about x-intercepts? Right? So it's where it crosses right here. Right? If you go up on the y-axis, right, these are where the positive numbers are. Those are all positives. If you go down from here, those are all negatives, right? So we want to figure out exactly where it crosses at the x-axis. Now, what's in between a positive and a negative? What number? What is it? 0. Yeah, so if we just figure out where this equals 0, we can have our x-intercepts, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this equation, so, and I'm just going to set it equal to 0. And that's going to tell me, where does this cross? Right here, the x-axis. Not up, not down, but right there in the middle at 0. Now, here's another little thing we have to look at. We're multiplying two numbers, right? This times this. There's two numbers. I know it says x minus, but it's really two different numbers. Whatever x is minus 4 is a number. Whatever x minus 8, that's a number. So we're multiplying two numbers. And after we multiply those two numbers, the answer is 0. So what do you know about these two answers? If we're multiplying two numbers and they equal 0, what must be true about one or both of these? So think about it. What times 0 equals 0? 0, right? So one of these two numbers, or both, have to equal 0 for them to multiply and equal 0. So what we can do is just say, well, what happens when, x minus 4 is 0? And also, when is x minus 8 equal to 0? One or both of them have to be 0 for this to work, right? That's the only way to multiply and get 0. So we just end up with two separate equations, right? And they're very basic and easy to solve. They're not always going to be adding, subtracting. You'll see on like number 5, there's going to be like some dividing on both sides. But you just solve for 0, and you can figure out, one x-intercept is 4, and the other x-intercept is 8. So we just found where the x-intercepts, 4 and 8. Right. And on the graph, 1, 2, 3, 4, we can start graphing. 5, 6, 7, 8. There they are. Okay. Now, what's the axis of symmetry? Going back to our last homework, right? Going back to here. How did we find 4 again? All right, well, we look right in the middle of our 2. Right in the middle of 2 and 6 was 4. And then even down here we saw, you can actually just add them together and divide by 2. That finds the middle as well. So let's use that idea. We can take 4 and we can take 8. 4 plus 8 divided by 2 equals 12 over 2, which is 6. Which of course agrees with what we would get on the graph anyway. If I asked you to find what's the middle of those two dots, you would say right here, and then you could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So whether you do it algebraically, or you just look at the middle of the two dots that are side by side, right? There's not one up here, down here, but they're side by side, we can get 6 as well. But again, our goal is to eventually be able to do this without having the graph. So if I ask you to find the x-intercept from the equation, you could get the two numbers, then find the middle of those two numbers to get the axis of symmetry, and so on, without having to actually graph it. Okay. Now, this only tells us that the vertex, right, is somewhere on this line, but it doesn't say exactly where. We don't know if it's up here, 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 way down here off the graph. We don't know. So here's the next step. We do know the first part, right? We do know that the first coordinate is 6, and that's always the case. The axis of symmetry is actually the x-coordinate of your vertex. But what we don't know is, well, where? Where on this line up and down, the y-coordinate? Where on that line up and down is the actual vertex? Okay. So I'm going to plug in one more time. It's like, well, if we need to figure out what the y value is for this x, we can just plug in and figure it out. Find p of 6. Remember, this just means plug 6 into this right here. 4. So subtract, put 6 in for all the x's, and let's figure out what that equals. So we have 6 minus 4, which is 2. And 6 minus 8, which is negative 2. So we know the answer is 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 right here. So we know where is this actual vertex on this line. So negative 4, 1, 2, 3, and 2, 3, and 4. There we go. And since this is the vertex, once you have that vertex, you can graph it. Remember how to graph a parabola. Okay, never a U. It's always going outward just a little bit, never straight and vertical. And we can see that this opens down as I circle up. This opens up, and since it opens up, the vertex is a minimum. So we know this is the minimum, the lowest point on the graph. So you can see there's quite a bit of small steps here, but they're basic calculations. Like we had to add 4, we had to add 8, we had to add 4 and 8 divided by 2, and then we had to do what 6 minus 4 is, what 6 minus 8 is, and we had to multiply 2 times negative 2. So the arithmetic is very easy and straightforward. It's understanding what kind of picture does this build and making sure you do everything in a certain order. Okay. You might also notice that if you don't have the first two x-intercepts right, what happens to your axis of symmetry? Well, that's going to be the wrong number. So when you plug it in here and plug it in over here, that's going to come out the wrong number. So everything kind of builds on the idea that you get those two x-intercepts right from the very beginning. Okay, a few other things. On the x-intercepts, make sure you use these braces. Okay, make sure you use those braces. Do not use parentheses. These are technically two answers for x. Now, if one answer was x and one answer was y, that's when you can use a parentheses because coordinates are x comma y. But if you have two answers that are both x-intercepts, right, you use these so you don't confuse it with an actual point on the graph. Like you want to go to 4, right 4 and up 8, right? This point has nothing to do with this graph, 4 comma 8. So you don't want to use parentheses at all. Same thing here. Axis symmetry is also x equals. So make sure you use x equals for your x-intercepts, x equals for your axis symmetry, which of course is the x-coordinate of your vertex. Your vertex should be in parentheses because it's an actual point on the graph. So if it's a point on the graph, you use parentheses. If not, use these braces. All right. I'm going to have you guys go ahead and try number 2 now. Just to review, first thing we did was we set our equation here equal to 0. I broke it up into two parts, one parenthesis on either side, and I got two answers. I put those two answers right here. Then I took my two x-intercepts, I put them into the top of finding the average. So I found the middle of those 2 points by adding them up and dividing it by 2. Always divide by 2 to find the middle. All right, that's how I got 6. And then I took 6, and that's the x-coordinate of my vertex. Always, 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 the x-coordinate of your vertex is your axis of symmetry. Then I took 6, and I plugged it into the original equation, right? Simplified those two, got two answers, two numbers, multiplied those two numbers together to give me my y-coordinate of my vertex. Right? Then after that, I could graph a nice smooth parabola, and I could see if it opens up or down. So I circled up or down. You will notice later on that there is no parentheses, like starting like number 5. I think it says like negative 2x. Is that what it is? Yeah. Just treat that the same. Put parentheses like that, and you can still do negative 2x equals 0. and x minus 4 equals 0 and not change a thing. As I mentioned before, you might just have to divide by negative 2 here. There's no adding, subtracting like all the ones prior, so you just get an answer of 0. And this side will be the same.